The women that worked there were gorgeous. They had the cigarette girls coming around, the camera girls coming around, pictures. Everybody's dressed to the nines, suits, ties, beautiful dresses. Everybody's dolled up. And all you had in there were wise guys and celebrities. Pool sticks were getting hit with, and guys were getting hit with cue balls, and then it rolled out into the street. And people ask me that, like, was I ever concerned about going to prison? And it's not really a thought. It's just not a thought in your mind. It's like, how I explain it? It's like smoking cigarettes. Do people that smoke cigarettes think they're going to get lung cancer? No. It's the same thing. Like, people in that life, we know it's a possibility. We know that eventually we may go to prison, but it's not constantly, like, we were always being followed. It was just part of, that was our job.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Money, Loyalty, Legacy Podcast. My name is Matt.
And your boy, the champ, Ross.
And today we are here with our very special guest, Mr. Anthony Ruggiano Jr. He is a former associate of the Gambino crime family. He now promotes staying away from the life and is active with helping kids. He is also a social media sensation and new to the world. Check out Reformed Gangsters, guys. So, Anthony, how are you today, sir?
Good. Nice to be here. Nice to meet you. Been looking forward to this since my cousin Gene told me about it.
Yes. So, let's talk about that real quick. What is it like when you and Gene hang out together?
Well, he's a lot younger than me, Gene. He's my son's age. He's actually a year younger than my son. So it was crazy because when I know him since he's born. Of course, he's my. But when I went away in the last time I went to prison in '96, he was a kid. He was 12. And then when I came out in '04, like, he was hanging out with the Bonnano family, you know what I mean? Like, I saw him in the salon and he, like, paid for my manicure. It was like, it was kind of weird, but, and I heard all these things about him when I was away, like, oh, your cousin Gene's doing stick-ups, your cousin Gene's doing this. And so it was a change.
Yeah.
It was
a huge jump from when you saw him last.
Yeah.
Did you have to talk to him a little bit about slowing down, or?
Not then. I didn't talk to him at that point because I didn't really, because he was still in the life. So, so the way he was behaving in the life was okay. When he got out of the life and he started getting himself jammed up, that's when I started talking to him more about, listen, calm down, let it go, watch what you're doing, you don't have to do that anymore. But when he was in the life, not really. I let him run, let him do his thing, yeah.
You guys were both kind of in the life at the same time for a period of time, correct?
Yeah, well, I was in prison. When he got into the life, I was in prison. I was in federal prison. And when I came out, so my father had passed away in '99. Mm-hmm. When my father passed away, Gene gravitated towards Vinny Asara. If I was never in prison, Gene probably would have been with us.
Right.
He wouldn't have been with the Bonnanos. He would have, because we were blood cousins.
Right.
Well, when my father died and I was in prison, he was friends with Ronnie G, so he gravitated towards that family.
Right.
And Vinny knew where he came from. Vinny knew his pedigree. Vinny knew his grandfather, my Uncle Jr. Vinny even knew my mother. Vinny, as I went to grammar school with my mother.
Oh, wow.
So there was a connection there, so Vinny sort of took him under his wing.
Okay. But you guys were on the street at the same time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever, like, hang out or anything like that, even though you're in different crews?
Not really. Not in the street, but we hung out naturally at family birthdays and weddings and funerals,
Yeah.
and stuff. But we never, like, ran the streets together.
Yeah. So what do you guys like talk about then? Say you guys are two different, families, right? Doing two different things. Like, what are two cousins that are in different...
Talk about what he's doing, what I'm doing, talked about crimes, talked about the family, talked about his grandfather, because his grandfather was a character. My Uncle Jr. was like, he was a character, and he was tight with Gene, and, he got arrested a few times with Gene, so we talked about that, and we talked about just normal stuff, really. Yeah.
Now, was it a big transition? Obviously, with Gene and I and Matt, we're all like the same age. Mm-hmm. So we kind of came up with that in life, where like the cell phones were starting to come out, and now they all say everything's getting recorded, everything's getting recorded.
Yeah.
Back then when you were doing your thing, there wasn't cameras like that back in the
No.
day, you know? So, I mean, was it a weird adjustment, you know?
It was for me. So when I was in prison, when all that started exploding, you know, the internet and so when I got out in '04, my daughter, I'll give you my daughter says to me, you got to get an email. I go, what? Why do I got to get an email? Like, what's an email? You know? She goes, no, you got to get an email. So all right, so I get an email. So she goes, all right, you need a username. Like, what the is a username? I think I need to use it. Like, what do you mean? I'm in jail 8 years. What username? She goes, no, you need a username, right? So I come up with a username, right?
What was it?
So I'm in recovery. So in prison, I did a lot of work on myself, which we'll talk about later. Right. So I realized that to recover and be truly happy, it's an inside out job. Mm-hmm. So I got clean in 1989. I'll be clean 35 years this January.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I used my username Inside Out 89. Mm-hmm. So that's my username Inside Out, and it still is to this day. That's my username Inside Out 89, and so that was my username. Then now I was living in a halfway house in Bushwick, Brooklyn, because I had to walk to the train station in the morning to get to work, and I'm walking to work, and there's all guys with suits, you know, it's a neighborhood, and we're walking to the train station to go to Manhattan, wherever they're going, and I see this guy with a suit and tie on in front of me, and he's walking, and he's talking and having a conversation. I'm going, what the f- is this guy talking to himself? Like, I couldn't, you know, because he was, well, you know, if he was like a hobo, or, you know, like a homeless person, then, you know, I wouldn't even pay him mind. You know, he's a crazy person. But this guy was like well-dressed, and, you know, he had a briefcase, and I said, is this guy talking to himself? So I sped up, you know, and I looked, and he had earplugs in his ears. I go, what the hell is it? Yeah, so, and everything was moving fast. You know, everything was moving fast.
Mm-hmm. You had stated in another podcast that you had officially decided to get involved in life when you were 16, correct?
Yes.
Your father had tapped his fingers on the table.
Yes.
And he said, you know, when you decide to go into this life, jail is going to come with it.
Right.
Correct?
Yes.
Now, how at 16 years old, you just wanted to just do what your dad, because you saw the money, right? Your uncle and your dad, correct?
Yes.
But you didn't know what it fully entailed, though, right? You just saw them that making money. And
I knew it by then. I knew that I wanted the respect he had. I wanted the power he had. Like, he started taking me around him. Like, I knew the respect he got. Like, I always knew since I was a little kid something was different about him. Because when I was a little kid and we went somewhere, when he walked in the room, the atmosphere changed, and you could feel it. Even as a young kid, I felt the atmosphere change, how people catered to him and how he was waited on. And I knew that wasn't happening even with my own uncles or my friends' fathers. You know, when I would travel with them, go on vacation, I used to go on vacation with friends of mine with their families, and their families weren't treated like my family. Like when we went to a restaurant, and there was a line waiting for a table. Like, we never waited for a table, but if I went to a restaurant with you and your family, we would have to wait for a table. So I always knew there was something different, but I didn't know what. Like, I just never knew what, but I knew. And even when I went to school, like, they would ask me what your father does for a living, and I would go home and say, Dad, the teacher wants to know what you do for a living. He would tell them I work in a dry cleaner. And I knew that wasn't true, but I would roll with it. I would go to school the next day and go, my father works in a dry cleaner. As I got older and I was in my neighborhood and I would walk to the corner, people would go, that's Fat Andy's son. And they would point me out, and I started getting treated differently. I wanted more of that. It was like a drug.
Right.
I wanted more.
For people that aren't aware, it's like being, like, a good analogy I would say is like being like a celebrity or like a rock star, or, you know, in your area or in New York, right? Like, you get treated like a celebrity.
Definitely. We got treated differently. We did what we wanted. Like, even when I was 17, I would go in bars and drink. People, they knew I was 17, but I was Fat Andy's son. If it was okay for him, it was okay with them. I would go in bars and drink. So, and I started getting in trouble in school. And at 16, I got suspended. And that's when I had that conversation. So my father, he didn't know how to really reprimand me, because my grandfather died when my father was 6. So he didn't have a father. He was raised by my grandmother, who never remarried. You know, she had 8 kids. My father was the youngest of 8. So he didn't really know how to reprimand. Like, he was this big gangster, but he was like a teddy bear at home. You know, like, he didn't never hit us. And he used to tell me, if I hit you, I'll kill you. That's why I don't hit you. You know, once in a while, he would grab me and shake me a little, but that was it. So when I got thrown out of school, he stopped talking to me. That was his punishment. And I waited a few weeks, and then I called my uncle up, his older brother, because there was a big age difference between my uncle Frank and my father. He was the oldest brother, and my father was the youngest, so there was like almost a 20-year age gap. And he came over, and we had a sit down, and my uncle said, he's like us, put him to work. And I decided, and my father says, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to work for you. And he told me, well, if you work for me, going to jail is all part of the job. And by that time, I was so enmeshed in that life, because I was born into it. Like, that's all I knew my whole life. His friends, his, running around with him. So by that point, I was already all in. Mm-hmm. And I just said, that's fine. And then the next day, he put me to work.
Even that young, though, it's crazy. You know what I mean? Like, because at 16, it's like you already knew what you wanted, though. Right?
Yeah. It was a different time back then. Like, I look at 16-year-old kids today, and I think of myself at 16. I was 16 in age, but not in my head.
Right.
Like, even when I look at my own children, like my daughter is 30. When I was 30, I was already married and had a child. Like, she's my little girl. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I was from a different generation than today.
Was there ever a time besides, okay, you're like, I want to go in this life, I see it, I see, how people are treated, the fancy things of that nature. Was there ever a time in your life when you were coming up like, yeah, I want to be something else? Or was it kind of always?
Not at that point. No, not at that point. At that point, I wanted all in. Later on, as I got older and I started doing some jail time and things started to change, then but not when I first got into it. No, I was all in. I was all in. I wanted to become made. I lost my own identity. I wanted in. Like, my father tried to discourage me, so I tell this story a lot. My father took me out with him on a Friday night to this bar in Brooklyn called the 5 O'Clock Lounge, I believe it was called. And we walked in. It was a Friday night, and the bar was jumping. Party, the jukebox was playing. I mean, it was jumping. And we walked in, and the bartender, of course, knew my father and got us a drink. And we're at the bar. People are coming, hey, Andy, what's going on? And talking. And then a while later, my father says, you notice anything? And I look around, I go, no, why? He goes, you notice a lot of people left? And I go, yeah, a lot of people did clear out a little bit. I said, he goes, you know why? I go, no, I don't know why. He goes, because I'm here. He says, because I'm here, and they don't know if I'm going to smack somebody, hit somebody, abuse somebody. So they hello and goodbye me, and they leave. He said, is that how you want to live? I was thrilled. I said,
yeah. I said, yes, of course.
Fuck yeah. I said, yeah. I was psyched. Like, I said, yeah. Like, it was the complete opposite effect that he thought it was going to have. Like, he was trying to discourage me. I was really all in. And then, like you said, like now I'm 17, 18, I'm going to the Copacabana, like on Goodfellas, I'm going in through the basement, up through the kitchen. I'm dating, I'm 17 years old, I'm making $100 a day. You know how much money $100 a day was in 1970? A lot of money. Right. Now I'm going to a bar. I'm going to this bar called, it was on 116th Street and 101st Avenue, Latika, something like that was the name of the bar. I'm 17. The barmaid's 25. She's gorgeous. I'm leaving her $20 tips.
Right.
I go in there one night. It's like a Thursday night. I tell her, what are you doing this weekend? She goes, why? I said, you want to go to the Copa? She goes, you can't get into the fucking Copa. I said, do you want to go to the Copacabana this Saturday night? She goes, yeah. I said, meet me here at 8 o'clock. I took her to the Copacabana. So now it's like, now the doors are opening. Right. The doors are opening. And then plus I'm making money, but everything's now still illegal. I'm starting to get arrested. A little fight here with this bar fight there.
Take us in there. Like, for people don't know, obviously they've seen the movie Goodfellas, but take us in the Copacabana. Describe the women. Describe the ambiance. What are you drinking?
So let's say Bobby Darin. He was a big. The first time I went to the Copa, was Tom Jones.
Okay.
All right.
I know Tom.
All right. Now Tom Jones back then was like Elvis. Right. He had a hit TV show, #1 records. I mean, the girls, it was insane. So we go see Tom Jones. My cousin Pauline wants to see Tom Jones. So my father takes us to see Tom Jones. It's the first I went to the Copa. We go in, we go there, we park the car. Crazy, hysterical people all up and down the street of the Copa. The line around the block, right? We go in through the other side of the block, through an alleyway, upstairs into the kitchen of the Copa, just like on TV.
Right.
All guys, up through the kitchen into the Copa. Now the Copa was a lounge. Upstairs was a lounge, big lounge with a piano, with like a trio playing, and then there was steps that went down into the showroom where the shows were in the basement of the Copa, and then you walk down the steps and there'd be all tables with a rail, and then all tables on the bottom, and the stage, and the act is right where that lamp is. That's where the microphone is.
Right.
The women that worked there were gorgeous. They had the cigarette girls coming around, the camera girls coming around, pictures. Everybody's dressed to the nines, suits, ties, beautiful dresses. Everybody's dolled up. And all you had in there were wise guys and celebrities. A couple of normies were there if they were lucky to get in, you know what I mean? But the mob ran the Copa. I mean, the 5 bosses of the 5 families, they had the Julius Spadell. He ran it. He used to sit at a table. Carmine was the head maitre d'. He ran the whole place. And it was just, was crazy. And whenever I went there with a girl, I got laid. To be honest. No, if I took you to the Copa, they gave it up. Like it was just like an automatic thing,
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm at the Copa, So, but and we were there and I saw Bobby Darin there, Don Wrinkles. I mean, I saw so many acts there. It was amazing.
Frank Sinatra.
I never saw him sing there, but I saw him in Jilly's hanging out. But I never saw him I met Don Wrinkles there. He came up there. So, and what was good about, my father now, Fat Andy, we would go to the Copa and we would meet whoever, like Bobby Darin would come out and take pictures with us. Don Wrinkles actually, because my father was in the music business at the time with Jay and the Americans. If you ever heard of Jay and the Americans, and my father was good friends with Fikey Valley. They used to come to my house for dinner. So we went to the Copa to see Don Wrinkles with Jay and his wife and me and my wife and my mother and father. And after the show, we were upstairs in the lounge, and Carmine, the maitre d', brought him over to meet us, Don Wrinkles. And so he comes over, and my father says, "What do you want to drink?" He went, "Whatever you're having, I'll have the same thing." He says, and then he looked at me and he goes, "Ain't you cute?" And he pinched my cheek, and he hung out with us for like an hour. It was great. It was just a great time. It was a different world back then. The mob had carte blanche. Like, we never waited online for nothing. Nightclubs, discos, restaurants, concerts. We had all the ticket brokers. Like, we went to Broadway plays, we sat in the front. I went to concerts, we sat in the front. I mean, it was just every door was open. I mean, they had their hands in everything. All the gay clubs, the porn, the vending machines, every club. And people say, why was celebrities so entwined with the mob? Because the mob owned all the clubs. Right. Where were they going to? Today it's different. Today they do arenas, they do stadiums. Mm-hmm. Back then they had to do nightclubs. Everything was owned by the mob in Chicago and New York, wherever you went.
So you're basically like, I like to use the analogy in a video game, meaning you can just do whatever you want, right? Like you could, there's a hot woman over there. I don't,
and women, and women liked us. They used to, because listen, we treated women good. We blind them, dined them. We had a lot of money. We're taking them to the Copa. We're taking them to Broadway plays. Who wouldn't want to be around guys like that? They knew what we were. They knew what we would, what we were up to.
Right.
Like even later on in years when I used to go out with John Gotti, I used to go to this club Pastels with him. This was in the 90s. This was in the late 80s, early 90s before he got arrested. There was a club in Brooklyn called Pastels. And in the back of the club was the VIP section, but you could see into the VIP section. And he used to sit at a long table where you could see. And all the girls would be standing and they would all be looking, and I would go out and say, "Come on, you want to come sit?" And they would see me come out. No, I was with him, and I would go, "Come on, you want to come sit with us?" And I would bring to the point where one night he leaned over to me and he says to me, "You want to stop bringing girls here? You got enough girls here?" I said, "Yeah, okay, no problem." Because I just kept on bringing them over there. And so it was, and then it was just a crazy time.
Now that you bring him up, obviously he's one of the most famous men in that life of all time. John Gotti is everywhere, especially nowadays. What was it like going out with him? So when you went out with him to that club, right? What kind of music are they playing? Obviously, it's a different era.
Club music.
Like from the 90s, though, right?
Yeah,
it's not
80s, dance music. Yeah, it was a disco. It was it was what we called it discos. I don't know if they still call them that. But it was a dance music.
Yeah, and is he? I mean, when you guys walk in the room, is everybody like, oh,
yeah.
no, there they
Yeah.
are?
It was like being with a major celebrity when you walked in. People used to ask him for his autograph. It was nuts.
Yeah,
It was nuts.
You guys are wearing suit and ties.
Suits and ties, and the people that worked there loved us because we were all big tippers.
Right.
So they knew when we walked in, we made their night. Like they knew they were leaving there with money. They knew that when we walked, and that was another thing that opened that why we got treated so. Because when we walked in restaurants and we walked in clubs, the staff knew we made their night. Like they knew like we were gonna be big tippers and they were gonna make money, and they catered to us.
Now, what was like an average bill, and what were people walking
Oh
home
my
with?
God! It all depends. Like for John, he's drinking Cristal champagne. It was thousands of dollars. You know what I mean? I wasn't drinking then. I was sober at that time. But yeah, it was crazy money. I mean, Peter Luger's hundreds of dollars in restaurants, thousands of dollars in clubs. You know, and that was big money back then. And tips, I mean, $100 bills, like tips, like here's 100. Here's, you know, like as you're walking down, getting to your table, you're giving out tips. You know, like when we walked in clubs, like the bartenders, like if we walked into a nightclub and we were going to stay at the bar, like they would actually like make room at the bar, like push people, like move, like give us a section of the bar.
Now, one of the things with that whole thing goes, how much were you ever like, man, I have to carry 5,000 times? Like, what was your kind of thing? Just
me personally, back then, I never left my house with less than $1,000 in my pocket. At some point, sometimes more. Yeah, okay. I never had no credit cards. You know, I didn't get a credit card till I got remarried. I married this nice, legitimate girl in 1993. And that was the first time I got a credit card. She, you know, it was a spouse card. It was her credit card. She just got me one, you know, with and that was my first credit card. And that was the first time I ever leased a car, too, because I had no credit. I didn't even have a fucking driver's license, right? She made me get a driver's license, you know. Like, she was 100% legit. Like, her father told me when I met him, I was his worst nightmare. That was my first meeting with my father-in-law. Like, he goes, all my life, I prayed my daughter would never marry a street guy. You're my worst nightmare, he told me. I got out of jail. His daughter's pregnant. I'm out of jail, right? His daughter's having my daughter. I'm sitting in his office. And he was, you know, he owned the wedding center. So he wasn't mobbed up, but he did business with the mob because of his business, you know. And you know, sitting down in his office, and he looked at me and goes, all my life, I prayed my daughter would never marry a street guy. You're my worst nightmare. You know, and here I am. No, I don't want nothing from you. You know, I just got out of jail. I'm running my father's number business. You know, I'm in the street. He offered me a business. I turned him down, you know, but you know, what are you gonna do? yeah.
Did you just laugh after that?
Yeah, my wife got nervous because she figured, you know, like, you know, I was gonna dive over the desk, and I just told him, I said, listen, I'm sorry, you know, I'm sorry you feel that way, but you know, I don't need anything from you. I don't want nothing from you. You know, I'm not here to shake you down. Well, you know, your daughter's, you know, we're having a baby. It's my responsibility. You know, I'll take care of it. You know, and that was it. You know, he wasn't happy. You know, our family would not happy at all. You know, but you know, it was like we knew each other from the neighborhood. We grew up in the same neighborhood. Since we came out, in fact, she actually sold my first wife her wedding gown. Yeah. And she actually dated my kid brother. When we were kids, we went out on a couple of double dates.
Really?
With my first wife and me and Alice and Valerie and my brother. I have pictures of us in the Copa, the father talking in the Copa, and seeing, you know, with my mother and father in the Copa.
Oh, that's
so, you know, as the world turns, you know, and then later on, her and I hooked up and we had a baby. Now I have a beautiful daughter, 30-year-old gorgeous daughter.
Nice. Congrats. What was it like going out, John? Like, you knew him on a personal level. Most people only see him in the movies, in the books and stuff. What was he like as a person when you guys would go out to the nightclub? Like, what was
he was a lot of fun. He was a jokester. You know, he would talk about people, like whisper in my ear, like, you know, talk about people. See, I knew him since I met him, you know, going back a little bit, like when I first left my block and I found out who my father was and I was hanging out in the neighborhood. My father took me to all the clubs then and started introducing me to wise guys when I was like 13. And he took me to the Burger Nut Fish Club, and that's the first time I met John. So I knew John before he was really John. Like, he was, you know, like before the public knew him. Like, he was young, you know, he was dangerous, but he was young. He wasn't even made yet. He wasn't even a made member of the Mafia yet. So I knew him then. And But when he became the Dapper Don, it was how he was fun. He was very charismatic. He liked to party. He liked to joke. He loved food. He loved to go to restaurants and eat. But he could abuse you. He never abused me, but he could verbally whip your ass. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like I saw him like abuse guys to the point where like I was embarrassed for them. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but he was fun. He loved to laugh and drink and hang out and break balls. You know, he was like regular guy.
So he was a personable person. He wasn't this like stoic, stern, like angry mob boss,
Not
right?
at all.
Like,
Not with us. Not at all.
sometimes they kind of portray it like he was, you know what I mean? Like
He could be. I saw him get angry
yeah,
a couple of times. I mean, I had seen him get angry and, like I said, like abuse people verbally.
yeah.
Like, I'll chop your fucking head off and, stuff like that. But when you were out with him, when I was out like at Pastels or in a restaurant with him, he was fun. It was fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he talked to random people when they come up.
Hey, give people his autograph, like
How crazy was that?
that
for
was
you?
nuts. That was the old timers didn't like that. Like my father and his partner Tony Lee, like the first time it happened was Tony Lee had to meet him for lunch. It was a business thing. So I was driving Tony Lee around. It was like 1989, 88, 89. And I was driving he was a main member of he was my father's partner, Tony Lee.
Yeah.
And I had to drive him. He had a lunch appointment with John in Brooklyn. So I drove him to Brooklyn. We walked into the restaurant and John was sitting at a table with Joe Watts, who was one of John's hitmen. I'm sure you've heard of him. Dangerous guy, German guy, dangerous. Excuse me. So we sat down. I'm sitting here. John was sitting here. Joe Watts and Tony Lee, and we're sitting down. And they're talking about what they got to talk about. We're eating lunch. And a couple came over and said, "Oh, Mr. Gotti, we're so happy to meet you. Could we get your autograph?" And he went, "Oh, yeah, sure, no problem." And he gives them his autograph, and they walk away. And Sammy the Bull talks about this a lot. He actually believed that he had a public. Like we don't have publics. We're in the mob. Mob guys don't have publics. But he really believed like and he looked at us and he says, "They love me." He goes, "The public loves me." He goes, "The worst I'll ever get is a hung jury." And he believed that. So he believed by him doing what he was doing, the public loved him and they won't convict him. Like he was promoting, like for the next jury, like planting seeds for the next batch of jurors. And he signed the autograph. And then when we got in the car, Tony Lee and I, to drive home, Tony Lee was beside himself. How the fuck did he do that? There's something wrong with him. And he was like, he was upset, Tony, that he signed the autograph because, old timers, they don't, Carlo Gambino would have never done that. That's for damn sure. Right. But, that's who he was. Right. I was thrilled. I'm like, oh, this is great. It's like, it didn't faze me in the least, but and then we went to see my father in prison and told him, what the is he kidding? Like, but
why did he take on that aura and that mentality of, oh, I have fans out there. I'll sign autographs. Why did he take that on? Because he knew the rules just like everyone else, right?
I think he just was an egomaniac. He was an egomaniac, and maybe he believed his own press. And I think he was trying to manipulate the public. Like he really believed that in the long run that was going to help him.
Yeah.
I mean, and it did help him to a point. I mean, he did beat a couple of cases. I mean, one we know the juror now was bribed. Sammy bribed one of the jurors, but the other two trials weren't. They were on the up and up. He was arrested with Tony Lee on that state case when they shot the union delegate, the union president, the Carpenters Union. So he just believed that the public loved him and he wouldn't get convicted.
Yeah.
He truly believed it.
Did you wear the hand-painted ties like he did?
Not only did I wear them, he gave me a couple of them. My son actually has one. Matter of fact, yesterday, my son told me he wore John Gotti's tie to work the other day.
Oh, nice.
Because he used to give them out, give them away after he wore them once or twice, and I have a couple of them home.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he gave me a couple. He even bought me a car.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So in 1988, I went to treatment I had a little issue with cocaine, but we'll talk about that, from the 70s. The disco part, Studio 54. He gave me a Coke spoon with the owner of the Studio 54 for Christmas. He gave out gold Coke spoons for Christmas, Steve Rebell. That was in the VIP. You walked in the VIP room and everybody got a Coke spoon, gold Coke spoon. That was Christmas presents. Yeah. It was, it was illegal, but it was legal in Manhattan.
Yeah.
Right. So I got out of treatment in '88, and I went to see him. So on Saturdays back then, he would eat lunch at his club in Queens, the Bonnano Fish Club. He would hold court there on Saturday afternoons. So I went there to see him. I just got out of treatment, and I walked in, and me and him, he takes me outside, and he tells me, "So you got a beat?" So I said, "Well, I got a beat today." I said, "I'm not, just for today, Yeah. And we talked, and then he goes, "Well, listen, do you need anything? Because I don't want you stressed out." He said it. He's left. He goes, "You need anything?" I said, "Well, I don't have a car," because my father was I didn't have a car at the time. And he goes, "You don't have a car?" I go, "No, I don't have a car." He says, "All right." He goes in his office. The Burger Fish Club and then next door, he had an office. And he went into his office, and he came out, and he goes, "Okay, let Tony take you to 84th Street in Atlantic Avenue. There's a car lot. Go in there, ask for a guy named Anthony. He's waiting for you." I said, "All right." I got in the car with Tony Lee. We went to the car lot. I got out, and I said, "You Anthony?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "John sent me." He goes, "Take any car you want." Now I'm looking for a Cadillac. Now I don't know. Take any car I want. I want a Cat do. So I'm looking around. He didn't have no Cadillacs, but I found this really beautiful white Bonneville, because back then Bonnevilles were like good, beautiful white 4-door Bonneville. I said, "How about that car?" He goes, "Yeah, fine." I took it, and I went back to the club, and I showed him the car. And then he went in his pocket, and he took out $2,000, and he says to me, here's $2,000. He goes, "I want you to come here every Saturday with $100, and don't disappoint me." I said, No, I won't." I go back the next week, I give him $100. I go back the following, I give him $100. The third week, I go back. He says, "How much you owe me?" I go, "Oh, well, I owe you $1,700. He goes, "How you doing?" I said, "Now I am doing good. I'm looking good now. I'm wearing nice clothes. I'm clean." He goes, "How much you owe me?" I said, $1,700. He goes, "Okay, keep it as a gift." So, my relationship with him was really good. For some reason, he liked me. He liked my family. He respected my father, because my father knew him since he was a teenager. And in East New York, Brooklyn, where they all come from, they all wanted to be Fat Andy. He was the gangster in the neighborhood. And, so them kids that wanted to be in the mob, he was like who they wanted to be. They wanted to be Fat Andy. And he loved my mother. Oh my God, he loved my mother. So, so it was a good thing.
Nice. Is there a story, just real quick, that you can talk about between you and John Gotti that you've never talked about before? Something that stands out in your mind, just a funny story or something that you haven't discussed before, or one of your fondest memories?
Well, there's a funny story I could tell you about John Gotti. So, it's a Saturday. So for some reason, him and I, he did time. I was a convict. I went to jail when I was 23, and he sort of liked that I went to jail when I was a kid in the state, and he went to prison in the state when he was younger. And him and I were both Scorpios. We were both Yankee fans. For some reason, he liked the fact that we were both Scorpios. His birthday's October 27th. My birthday's October 29th. So it's Saturday afternoon, and it's lunchtime, and we're sitting in the Burger Fish Club, and I walked in, and there was a chair by him. He goes, come sit here, right? And everybody's staring at so now when he was the boss, the guys were coming out of the woodwork that I didn't even know, that I never even, guys from the Bronx, who the knew these guys? They were never around. Now they're all, every Saturday, so I walk in, and he sees me, he goes, "Come here, come sit next to me." And they're all staring, who the is this kid standing next to, who the is, and he's looking at them, and he's sitting there, and he sees it, and he looks at it, he goes, "What are you standing? That's Fat Andy's son, Anthony." "Oh my God, Fat Andy, oh, how's your father? Oh, we love your father." Because my father was in jail, and the whole atmosphere changed. So now we're sitting down, and he leans over to me, and he goes, "On a diet?" He goes, "Everybody here's on a diet?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "If I went outside right now and started picking up little balls off the street, all these guys would be behind me picking up little shit balls off the street." I said, and I bust out laughing, and everybody's staring at it. They don't know what we're talking about. Yeah. We just had, it was just funny. It was another time, when my podcast, so I always sit behind this portrait of my parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when I got out of prison in 1980, and I don't know, I was in his house. I don't remember what I was in his house for, but I ended up in his house. And he had these beautiful portraits on the wall of his family, right? And I go, wow, those are really nice portraits. Who did them for you? He says, when he was in federal prison, he said, I knew this counterfeiter that became a portrait artist, right? The guy was a counterfeiter. Now he's in prison and he's
Being an artist.
yeah, and he's doing beautiful portraits. Like the guy was an artist. I mean, the guy was a counterfeiter. So he said, I said, really? He goes, yeah, I gave him pictures, snapshots, Polaroids, and he made these portraits. I said, oh, wow. So I went in my pocket and I had this little black and white picture of my parents that I kept in my wallet. And I showed it to him. I said, you think you could do anything with that? He goes, I don't know, let me see, let me give it to him. So I gave him the picture. And about a month later, he sends for me and I go see him and he hands me this portrait. And I went home and it was this beautiful portrait of my parents that was made off this little picture.
I've seen it. It's actually it's a really beautiful painting.
Yeah, my father has a cigarette in his hand. Yeah.
Nice.
And horses. He loved to bet horses. So we used to talk about gambling all the time, you know, horse racing, sports. He was a big gambler.
Would you say you had a closer relationship with him than other guys in that life? Do you feel like it sounds like you had like a kind of a special bond with him.
I think I had a relationship with him, guys from my neighborhood, we had a different relationship with him than the rest of the city because we came from the same neighborhood. Like my father knew him since he was a kid. Tony Lee knew him since he was a kid. So our relationship with him was different than guys from the Bronx, let's say, or guys from Manhattan. So yeah, we had a different kind of relationship with him, more of a family type relationship than like not a mob family type thing, like family type thing. So yeah, he definitely.
Were you ever worried like he's becoming a celebrity? Maybe I'm going to get in serious trouble one day just because of all the attention he's getting at this point, like in his height in the 90s. Were you ever worried like, oh, he's known by everybody? You know what I mean? Like maybe I'm around him all the time. Like, were you ever concerned? Like maybe
No, I mean, no. And, people ask me that, like, was I ever concerned about going to prison? And it's not really a thought. It's just not a thought in your mind. It's like, how I explain it? It's like smoking cigarettes. Do people that smoke cigarettes think they're going to get lung cancer? No. It's the same thing. Like people in that life, we know it's a possibility. We know that eventually we may go to prison, but it's not constantly, like we were always being followed. I was a nobody. I was always being followed. We knew he was always under surveillance. It was just part of, that was our job.
Is there any fear at all, just in the street, whether it be, say you run into some gang members or say you run into a rival mafia, the Russians or the Albanians or another person, another criminal element? Was there any fear like you could get hurt or you might lose your life?
It wasn't fear. It was like we knew, I knew I could always speak, like if I went to certain clubs or certain neighborhoods and I went in certain clubs in the neighborhoods, odds are I was probably going to have a beef because, just out of competitiveness or, ego, like I knew, like I came from Queens. I knew every time I went to Bensonhurst, I have a fight because the guys in Brooklyn thought they were different than the guys in Queens. Like I knew I had fights with guys from downtown Manhattan. My father used to tell them, what the you think the sun only shines in Manhattan? It don't shine in Brooklyn? You know what I mean? Like, so there was always, that there was always fights and rivalries, but not really a fear. But I knew that if I went into this neighborhood, something may jump off.
Yeah, and you kind of took it as it is what it is.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Now, did you have, would you ever carry weapons on you?
Not randomly, no. Only if there was problems going on that we would carry weapons. I never just left my house. Friends of mine did, but I never personally. My father always told us only carry a weapon if you're going to use it. Like I had a guy, Ronnie One Arm. He became a captain in the Gambino family. Really tough guy, killer. He's in jail doing life. He always had a gun on him. He had one arm. Mm-hmm. And thank God he had the gun on him because he was getting stabbed one night, and if he didn't have the gun on him, he would have died because guys were stabbing him, and while he was on the floor, he got the gun out and he shot one of them in the face.
Oh, wow.
So some guys always had guns on them, but we knew, who was who. But I never personally left my house with a gun unless, I thought something was jumping off or whatever.
You said you had beefs. Like, you obviously, even in the Gambino family, you were hanging around the big leaguers, John Gotti, your father. You were around a lot of prominent people. Who's messing with you?
Oh, it's not messing. It's like so I had a sports book. I'll give you for instance, with a beef what like I would consider a beef. So I had a sports book, right? Guys were betting with us. So a guy owed us $15,000. He didn't pay us. Him and his father were with a captain in the Bonnano family. So that's a beef. Now you're with this guy, Joey Metropolitan. He hung out on Metropolitan Avenue. So his nickname was Joey Metropolitan. So they're with Joey Metropolitan, who's with Joe Messina, who's the boss of the Bonnano. Now that's a beef because now you owe me $15,000. You're with another family. So now I put a beef in, and we have a sit down. Now I sat down with Joey Metropolitan, my father's partner, and the kid that owed us the money's father, not the kid that owed me the money, but his father, because his father was with the Bonnano family. And we sat down, and I made a deal with the father to pay us back $7,500, half of the 15, because my father was telling me a half a loaf of bread is better than no bread at all. And it was all on paper. It wasn't a Shylock loan, so it was just all on paper, bets.
Right.
So I made a deal with the guy to give me $7,500. We'll make his son even, and his son can't bet with us no more. So that's a beef. That would be a beef, you know. Or if someone had a fight in a club, like if my friend had a fight with a kid from the Bronx and he was with another wise guy, we'd have to sit down and have them make up or whatever, or tax them. Well, you know, those are beefs. Those are considered beefs. You know, it doesn't have to be a violent thing.
Did you have any rivals within your own family?
Did I personally have any rivals?
Yeah, was there anybody you're like, I don't know if I can go meet up with this guy, like there's some tension there or anything like that?
Not really. I mean, even if there was tension, I mean, listen, I had, so you ever see the gangs in New York?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You see in the beginning of that movie, The Tunnels?
All right.
Them tunnels are still there.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, in Lower East Side. Go there. Yeah, them tunnels are still there. So this is in the 70s. So friends of mine had a beef with some guys and somebody got stabbed. And so the guy that got stabbed, his crew hung out in them tunnels. So they said if we don't send them $2,000, the kid was going to press charges. So my friend Greg, whose father was a wise guy, who was a button guy with the Gambino family, he knew them. So he took me to meet them in those tunnels, right? Yeah, now I'm walking through these tunnels, you know, and guys, you know, and there's all kids posted up in these tunnels, and there's little lights, and you know, now I'm getting a little nervous because now I'm in this tunnel, but my father knew where I was, so I always knew that if anybody hurt me, they were gonna die.
Yeah.
So I always knew that in my heart and I always knew that if anybody hurt me seriously, no matter who it was, they were gonna fucking die. I knew that. So I would always get, even though I might be dead, they're going to be dead too. So I'm walking in these fucking tunnels along. Where the fuck am I going? You know, finally we got to the place where I had to go, and I gave them the money, and we talked, and then I got out of them tunnels. But them tunnels still, and then later on in the 80s, they actually opened up a club called The Tunnel. And it was right on top of the tunnel. Yeah.
There you go.
I actually opened up a club there called The Tunnel.
That's hilarious.
Have you seen the movie A Bronx Tale?
Yeah.
So you know that scene where the bikers come into the bar and Sonny shuts the door and he goes, "Now you just can't leave." Yeah. Did you ever have a situation like that where you got into an altercation with a street gang or bikers or another criminal element in the city?
In my neighborhood, we got into a beef with a biker gang in a bar. We hung out, and my cousin and two of my friends killed one of them, stabbed one of them, and they went on the lam for murder. They beat the case. Because they went on the lam for 2 years, and then when they got arrested for the murder, there was technicalities, we were selling back then we used to call them goofballs. Today it's the Oxycontins of today. Okay. This was back then. There were 2-and-alls and second-alls. We used to call them goofballs. We never took them. But we had a connection in the pharmacy, and we would get 1,000 at a time, and we'd sell them for $1 a piece, which was a lot of money. Right. And but we had this pizzeria, and we ran it like a business. So we only sold them certain hours of the day, and we didn't want to get hot, and we wouldn't sell them. And once we got to our bar, we wouldn't sell them. So if you can't, we never had them on us. We wouldn't sell them out. That was the bar. It was called the Club 93. That's where we hung out with our girls. That was our bar. It was on Woodhaven Boulevard and Atlantic Avenue. these biker guys, they knew we were selling these pills, and they came to the bar looking for them. And when we told them no, they got like antsy, and they started, you know, getting rowdy, and we started fighting, and the fight spilled out into the street, and one of them got killed.
How many guys was like the fight? I mean, how many bikers were there?
It was about 5 or 6 bikers.
So it was a nice.
Yeah, it was a nice fight. I mean, pool sticks were getting hit guys were getting hit with cue balls, and then it rolled out into the street, and then one guy got stabbed up, and when he got stabbed up and hit the ground, like then everybody scattered, and he was dead. The guy died.
Yeah. Oh wow. Was investigations different back then? It's obviously a different era. They didn't have cameras and whatnot like they do nowadays. So when the police come, you guys are gone, and they just take eyewitness testimony.
There was people on bus stops. Some of the people in the bar, there was a couple of legitimate people in the bar. So they got names of the people. They got the 2 names of the people my friend Joey and Robert, who stabbed the guy. But don't forget too, a lot of cops back then were on the take. I mean, my father used to get shook down by cops because of me. Like, I would have a bar fight, and they would come to my house and say that, you know, the guy pressed charges on your son. Nobody pressed charges on me. You know, here's 1,000, you know, get the fuck out of here, you know. They would shake us down all the time, you know, for money. They were all on the take. Back then, I got caught once with a pound of pot in my car by a squad car. He pulled me over. I had a pound of pot in the car, right? So I got out of the car, and I got out, and I threw it under the car, right? And they found it, so they put it in the squad car, and I was with this guy, Donnie, right? He don't know what the fuck is going on. So they come over to me, they go, all right, get in your car and get the fuck out of here. I said, all right. I said, Donnie, get in the car. Now, Donnie knew they found the pound of weed. I go, Donnie, get in the car. And he was like, let's get in the fucking car. Right? So he get in the car. He goes, what happened? I go, what happened? They kept the fucking pound of pot. That's what happened. And we left, you know?
Yeah.
It was a different, listen, back then was a different world than it is today.
Right.
Today there's cameras in the fucking doorbells.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
True.
Like the way I made money back then, I could never, I don't know how, I don't know how I would survive today in the street. I don't know what I would do.
What was your big take as far as, like, you know, sometimes people kind of fall into certain roles in the life that you were living, you know? What was the major thing that you kind of brought to the table? Was your, like, niche as far as, like, you know, being a street guy? And
I was a good earner. I mean, I know how to put things together. Like, so I always had a job. I always had not a legitimate job. Like, I always worked in a number office or a bookmaking office, or I wrote numbers. I always had a niche like that. Because my father always had a big number business, he had a big sports business. So I always had a job in the office because to oversee what was going on. But on my own, I had a vending company. I ran a big vending company. I had a lot of gambling machines. I had a stolen car ring. I put together a stolen car ring. I had 3 chop shops. I had, like, there's this here. I'll give you for instance. So it's 1990. This is how I start out my day. I go to the bakery. There was a bakery on Liberty Avenue. I go in, the woman there used to make eggs. They loved me. I would go in there, I would get my egg sandwich, my cup of coffee, have my post and my daily news. And then the crews would come. So one crew would come. That was my credit card crew. So I had a guy in the post office that was giving me stacks of credit cards, and still in the envelopes. So I had one crew with a van. I would give them the credit cards, and today they would go to Pennsylvania to bang out the credit cards. I'd send them out with the credit cards. Then the car crew would come in. That night we stole 10 cars. Now they got to get chopped, right? Because now we're in Forest Hill stealing. They would come in, and we would, all right, 3 guys would go to this chop shop, 3 guys would go to that chop shop. This guy would get the vans, take the parts to the junkyards and sell the parts. And I'd send that crew out. Then the vending company crew would come in. Now I had all these gambling machines. They'd have a truck with slot machines, and I would give them a list of which spots they had to go to. So I was like a delegator. That was my niche. So I put it together and delegate. And then I would go to the club, and I would have lunch. And then I would go to the track and bet horses, and then I'd go home and take a nap. When I first got married to my second wife, she was a legitimate girl. So I come home like 4 in the afternoon, 3 in the afternoon. She goes, what are you doing home? I said, I came home to take a nap. She goes, you take naps? I said, yeah, every day I take a nap. And don't let nobody up in the room, like, do not disturb. She still tells my daughter to this day, your father wouldn't let you in the room when he used to come home to take his naps. You know that, right? You weren't allowed in his room. I said, yeah, that's right. She wasn't allowed. Yeah, keep telling her that. Yeah. Yeah, so I knew my father taught me about a little bit about everything. So my niche was that I knew that life. That's how and what happened was because of all my life experiences, when I left that life, that was my education, and that helped me become a counselor. That helped me because I had no education. I never went to school. I had no skills. When I decided to leave that life, I had no skills. My father didn't teach me how to fix a flat. Even to this day, I'm useless. I was living in Michigan. I got a job. They gave me a toolbox. I called my son up. I go, you never guess what the they gave me? He goes, what? They gave me a toolbox. He goes, are they crazy? What are you going to do with a toolbox? He started laughing. I said, I don't know. I'll fake it till I make it. You know what I mean? They gave me a toolbox. Like, he was hysterical. He goes, the toolbox? What are you going to do with a toolbox? So when I got out of the life, I didn't know I had no social security. I still, to this day, I had no education. I had no skills. I didn't know how to build anything. I didn't know how to use any tools. But my life experience, people heard about it and put me to school. And I went back to school and became a counselor in a treatment center. So that was my education.